Kim Trainor is the granddaughter of an Irish banjo player, a very good one at that, and a Polish faller who worked in logging camps around Port Alberni in the 1930s. Her book-length poem, Letty, Bookhug 2018, was a finalist for the Raymond Souster Award. Bluegrass will appear with Ice House in 2022. Her poetry films, created with musician Hazel Fairburn, screened at the Zebra Poetry Film Festival in 2020 and will appear at the 9th International Film Festival in Athens in 2021. Letty will also be performed live as part of the Ensemble exhibit at the New Media Gallery in New Westminster in the fall of 2021. Recent poems have appeared in Otoliths, Fire Season, Ecocene, Anthropocenes, Dark Matter, Woman Witnessing, and Interdisciplinary Studies in Literature and Environment. Kim teaches in the English department at Douglas College, where she chairs the Faculty Association's Climate Emergency Action Committee. And there is some big news with that today, wasn't there, Kim? Yeah, maybe you can tell us about that. She lives in Vancouver on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. Hazel Fairburn grew up and around London, UK, and studied music at the City University and viola at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Whilst in London, she played with the London Musicians Collective, various avant-garde ensembles, and African jazz band in and a lot of Irish pubs. Following this, studying ethnomusicology at University College of Cork and the University of Cambridge provided the opportunity to pursue a growing fascination with traditional Irish music, and her PhD, Anarchy and Heterophony in the Traditional Music Session, was the first in its field. In 1993, Hazel co-formed Horus X with producer-drummer Mark Russell, currently teaching music, art, and audio in Vancouver. Hazel is also exploring the manipulation of violin-generated sounds, recently collaborating with UK-based Moff Skillington to produce The Radio People by Sleeping Ducks, and working with Mark Russell on a new studio-based electronic acoustic project.
Thank you so much, and I'm so delighted to be here. And I'm going to read a couple of poems first, and then we're going to dive into some poetry films I've been working on lately, and Hazel has done all of the soundtracks for them, and I think they're brilliant, her soundtracks, I mean. So I'm very excited to share them with you. And the collection I'm going to be reading to you from is actually one that I completed recently. And it's called, tentatively, Tell Me Where Do We Go From Here, but I don't know, I keep trying to think of something better. So if you have any ideas, let me know. So this is completed, but I'm just sort of starting to send it around places. And it's in two parts. So it starts off in Wildfire Season, and it's charting to some extent a long distance relationship, and then the sort of tension with that and an increasing urgency or sense of urgency with climate change in the Boreal. So I'm going to read just two poems from that first section. And then the second part is this very long sequence called Seeds, which I'm very sad that I finished because I enjoyed working on it so much. And it's really trying to think through ideas about resistance and survival and emergence in the context of the sixth mass extinction that we're facing. And basically the existential threat that we're facing. Oh, and the exciting news though that I had about my climate change committee at the college is I had this long, really, really boring AGM today, and a few of you here will know what I'm talking about. And I somehow broke the convention with Robert's rules. I just put forward a motion that I didn't know what to do with, but the end result is they approved the climate change committee. So we are now official, which is great. So yeah, yay. So each of the seeds that I look at in this sequence, I'm thinking of as a kind of blueprint, and it could be an organism, it could be a human-made tool or artifact, just something that just whether it's its own DNA or the way in which it's constructed is adapting to and responded to our current existential threat and showing different ways of being in the world. So in part, I'm really just trying to think about forms of attention. And I would say the connection between the first and the second half of the book, Wildfire and Seeds, is serotiny. And this is this awesome word I discovered while I was working on this. Serotiny is the idea that some seeds, especially in the Boreal, require fire or heat to germinate. And so there are important reasons for having wildfires, and partly our wildfire regime has tried to suppress that over the last century, and that's actually led to some really serious consequences. And then partly I'm thinking about attention as a moral act. And I always speak back to Ian McGilchrist, and he's one of my favorite neuroscientists. Is it possible to have a favorite neuroscientist? Anyways, he said, without alertness, we are as if asleep, unresponsive to the world around us. Without vigilance, we cannot become aware of anything we do not already know. So I'm thinking about ideas associated with attention. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Wildfire. It's a very short one. The wildfires have been burning some weeks now, and even here at noon, the light is sci-fi, burnt ochre, umber. The radio reports evacuations, but none near you, where you've been working long days in the West Kettle and Similkameen, while I have been carrying on without you. You call each night from a payphone in the Kootenays. I cup your flickering voice to my ear. Crickets, the zip of a tent, B minor sharps and blues, rasp of white noise. You have become so thin. If I breathe too hard, you are extinguished. Don't leave me. Come closer into Panem, love. Come deeper, cochlear, sheltered in my hearing. And then the second one, it's also connected in some ways to wildfires, and this one is called Paper Birch. And the paper birch is one of my favorite trees, and it's also known for being able to repopulate areas that have been devastated by wildfire as well. They like to they germinate in sort of these more desolate areas, and they perform a really important function in the ecosystems. Paper birch. These are notes for a poem I meant to write in August, but poetry seemed very far away then. The BC wildfires smudged the shoreline of the Saskatchewan, everything ash on the tongue, like cigarettes or coffee dregs, and the sun a smoked pink disk. I had not seen you for weeks except by Skype. I'll strip for you, you said, and you did. But now in flesh meandering, now talk, now silence, now climate change and your research on the boreal. Here's aspen, here's chokecherry. Look, is that paper birch? I asked. No, you said. Then yes, yes. And here are my scribbled notes. Betula peperifera, small cuts in the cream skin, like welts or gaping mouths of blood, of rust. Carved initials join lovers. A trunk stripped, except for bandaged swaths over brown flesh. A square excised. The single deep gash for leverage and a sheet torn off. Shreds of paper on the ground. They were refugia, you told me, migrating north, following the retreating sheets of ice. Tell me, where do we go from here? Score me with desire lines, write words for songs that have none in the wrist blue margins, sparse language of the tundra. Sew me with tamarack and stretch me over cedar ribs, tipped leeward to split the river's tongue. You say paper birch fires quickly and burns hot. Ignite me. I think that might have been the day, the night, you sang for me the Tsama Lacha Nafshi. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh longs for you, in a dry, parched land. So those are the two poems I was going to read to you from Wildfire, which is the first section of the book. And then I am going to try to do this. I should have experience from my students of sharing things, but I always manage to mess this up. So we'll see if it works. So this is from the second part of the collection. It's called Seeds. And as I said, I've been working on these poetry films. I found it's a really interesting way to match images to the words, and then Hazel's taken it to a whole new level, I feel, with the soundtrack that she's brought to it, and offering these really cool interpretations. So I will see if this works. I'm going to try to share my screen. This first one is called Tardigrade, and what can I say about it? There was this Israeli rocket that was sent to the moon, attempting to deposit some payload on the moon, and it crashed. And it was called Bereshit, which is the first word of Genesis, which means in the beginning. So let's see, I have the sound on. I'm gonna go to this. This is on Vimeo, so let's see if I can grab this. Okay, please, if someone could write in the chat if you can't hear this, and I'll stop and start again. Okay, because honestly, I've had students like 3 minutes into something, and then they tell me at the end of it, oh, we couldn't hear anything, Kim. And then I have to go all the way back to the beginning. Okay. All right. Analog 1. These instructions contain 4 analog entries comprised of this set of instructions, the first 3 verses of Genesis, a human child's line drawing of a stick figure, a primer to a fraction of the Earth's 7,111 languages, followed by a brief statement on existential threats and archival cultures, which has been handwritten in a small notebook, then translated into binary code and printed by lasers, followed by haiku. This poem can be read by the naked eye. Analog 2. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim va'et ha'aretz. V'ha'aretz hayata tohu v'vohu v'choshech al pnei tohom v'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Vayomer Elohim yihi or vayehi or. Brief statement on existential threats and archival cultures, written in a small notebook and then translated into digital code and printed by lasers. First, there were handprints outlined in reverse by mixing a paste of red ochre and spit and blowing this through a hollowed-out bone. Then stitched leather pouches to hold seeds, etc., then scrolls, pyramids, and codices. These have all lasted millennia and were analog before it was cool to be analog. Then came microfiche on plastic sheets that will probably degrade or melt in about 100 years, or in the event of a catastrophic event. In the meantime, along came digital formats, zeros and ones, punched into IBM cards by female key punchers like my mother circa 1974. Then microchips and thumb drives. Information coded in synthetic DNA or grafted onto the DNA of living plants, such as Nicotiana benthamiana, common tobacco, that can, in theory, grow whole libraries from seeds. Imagine walking through a park that is actually a library, every plant, flower, and shrub full of archived information. Then back to analog again, with optical nanolithography, letters the size of a bacillus bacterium etched onto glass, and then filigreed with atoms of nickel. Layers and layers of this stuck together with epoxy resin, holding the DNA and hair follicles of a venture capitalist, as well as a pinch of tardigrades, who also, in their dormant state, have their cells replaced by a protein that resembles glass. And all of this shot to the moon on the Bereshit rocket, which crashed 11th April 2019. Probably the tardigrades survived. So that's the first film I wanted to show you. I'm sorry about the sound. I can't figure out how to make it any louder, so you might have to just turn up your own computer to hear it better. Okay, cool. Jillian says it was all right. So that was inspired by my interest in archives and tardigrades, who are my new favorite tiny creature. It's one of my secret wonderful things to do. Well, no longer secret apparently, which is to watch YouTube videos of tardigrades. So the next film I wanted to show you is, it's a little slower and more contemplative, and it's called The Beautiful Cell. And maybe I won't say anything about it. I'll just share it with you. I hope I can. Let's see. So, okay, here we go. Okay, so I will share my screen. And again, if you can't hear it, please let me know. I think I have the share sound on. Here we go.
There is the same difference between a pain that someone tells me about and a pain that I feel as there is between the red that I see and the being red of this red leather box. Being red is for it what hurting is for me. The extremely tiny, mostly transparent sea angel, Cleone limacina, is actually a slug. It ranges in size from 1.2 to 3 centimeters and preys on sea butterflies. Every angel is terrified. Just as there is an I, John Doe, there is also an I, Red, an I, Water, and an I, Star. Everything, from a point of view within itself, is an I. Limacina helicina, or sea butterfly, actually a snail, swims to a depth of 3,718 meters. Its shells are dissolving due to ocean acidification. The sea cell, love child of slugs and jellyfish, aka sea walnut, blob, jelly ball, goo of stealth, jelly bean of the sea, forms eerie luminous chains and may play a significant role in carbon sequestration. The aesthetic object is inwardness as such. It is each thing as I. Aurelia aurita, moon jelly, is not a fish. Looks like the moon when light pours through. A sea gooseberry drifts like the barred spiral galaxy NGC 1398, 65 million light years from Earth. The glasswing butterfly is known in Spanish as espejitos, little mirrors, a chaotic nanostructure makes its wings clearer than glass. The essence of glass lies in its serving as passage to other objects. Its nature is not to be itself, but other things. Look through the transparent belly of a glass frog, little window into its body. This example of the glass can help us understand intellectually what, with perfect and simple evidence, is given us in art, an object with the double condition of being transparent and of having what is seen through it be itself, not something else. Glass octopus, glass catfish. With a hand lens, you can see its beating heart. This object that can be seen through itself, this aesthetic object, is found in elementary form in metaphor. Metaphor is the elementary aesthetic object, the beautiful cell. I, sea angel, I, moon jelly, I, self, I, frog, I, glass.
I love sea angels. I think they're so amazing. I don't know. I think maybe I have time for one more short film. I hope. So this is a more upbeat one. It'll wake us up a little bit. So this one is called Elizia, and it's a little more upbeat. And I'm trying to remember what it's about. I can't at the moment. Okay, let's see. Oh, yes. Okay. So this is a really cool creature. It's a slug, but it has incorporated chloroplasts into its body, so it can synthesize energy from sunlight. So it's kind of like this in-between creature that's maybe evolving, and it's generating energy by just taking in sunlight in the salt marshes. So I will share my screen with that, and we'll zoom in and see. Okay.
The light reactions, the dark reactions, leaf unfurling, the light. Eastern emerald Elizia, clade sacroglossa, Elizia chlorotica, littoral, in the salt marshes, the tidal marshes, small pools and shallow creeks. leaf unfurling, the light. The pigment chlorophyll absorbs the blues, the reds, the spectral blues, absorb a photon, lose electron, flows to pheophyton, to a quinon. Flow electrons, flow the light reactions. In the salt marshes of Texas, among the blue crabs and the mud crabs, in the tidal marshes of Nova Scotia, vanishing, cryptic green algal endosymbiont, seaweed, sea green, chloroplasts sucked out and stitched to tubules like leaf veins, shifting genes, diverticula, radula, algal plastids, the lumen, the lumen. A leaf unfurling, pale green chloros, chloros, sea green, moss and pickle, emerald, pistachio and pesto, chlorophyll, love for this. The light. Absorb the blues, absorb a photon, lose electron, flow to phenophyton, flow to quinon, flow electrons, gathering. The lumen. A drop of water, split. Regain electron, a molecule, dioxygen. The light reactions, the dark reactions, leaf unfurling, the dark, realm of the dead, the fields of bliss, Elysium, the dark reactions. Flow electrons, chain reactions, break down carbon, sweet conversion in the dark and in the light. Endosymbiont, who puts the light together. Chloros, plastos, chloroplast, the one who forms.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much for listening and watching. I'm done.
Hey, Kim,
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
thank you.
That was really neato. Can I ask you some questions?
Yes. Hazel's here too, by the way.
Oh, Hazel, where are you?
Yeah.
The music was awesome. It worked perfectly. Hey, Kim, I wanted to ask you, I kind of pictured you as like a youngster looking at little things under leaves and stuff with a magnifying glass. Was that the type of person you were, or when did your love of little things occur?
Oh, interesting. I remember like early like projects at school, like collecting spiders and drawing them. So that might not be entirely inaccurate. And then releasing them again, of course.
Right.
But yeah, for sure.
I kept thinking about like basically you've just shown us like a world within a world, you know, like you look at a like say you say like you look at a puddle like Tina talked about, and then within that puddle are all these little things. And then when you see sort of like a clear cut or like an oil spill, and we usually just think about like one fish or one duck in the oil. Do you think about all those little creatures when you see such devastation?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing with clear cuts is they do regenerate pretty quickly, and the creatures come back. and we forget about that too. But yeah, there is definitely some devastation that occurs at many levels, micro and macro, when you have that kind of treatment or monolithic treatment. Definitely. I was thinking about metaphor too, and metaphor as a kind of lens that magnifies things in different ways or offers different perspectives. So that's where the Ortega Gasset quotes were coming in, thinking about sort of one of the, I don't know, engines, can I say, of a poem that do some interesting work for you.
Mhm. And maybe one last question from me. Tell me about some of the benefits you find from, say, like sharing a poem, like reading it to people, putting it into a creative piece, like some of those videos, collaborating. Do you have a preference, or is there a poem when you write it, you're like, this is going to be for that? Tell me about that.
Oh, they usually just start on the page on paper. I started moving into more poetry films. Well, for one reason, I have a friend who works with light. She's an artist at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, and she works with projectors and light, like crystals and glass that the light is projected through onto screens. And she would do some small evenings where some of us would come together and read a poem or a story, and then she would often project images. And I first read Paper Birch there, and she had this piece of, it was almost like pink, a circle of glass that she projected onto this white cloth, and it looked like the smoked disk of the sun. It was just completely fortuitous, like it wasn't something we planned, but it just worked so interestingly to see that mix in that intimate environment. And I think film does that as well for you, like being able to bring in some images, and especially with Zoom too, I think we've been brought back into that fairly intimate environment too, to be able to see things very close up, often too close up.
Yeah, and if people in the audience wanted to check out your videos later, how can they find them?
That's a great question. Some of, I mean, I have a fair number on Vimeo. Some are just free for anyone in the public, but I haven't made all of them just free yet, just because they're not quite, I'm still working with them and so on. So as they become more, as I become happier with them, I'm releasing them into the world. I am having a film that Hazel worked with me screen at the 9th International Film Festival online fairly soon in early June. So that would be another opportunity. And that's from my earlier collection, Lady. And there's a section there called Ghost, which is set in the Mojave Desert. And that will be screened live, or live-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we couldn't go to Athens this year, alas.
Oh, how come?
Yes.
So by the way, those were really awesome. Even my kids came in and were like, just like watching,
Yeah.
you know, almost like where you discover something with I don't even know, not a telescope. Well, I guess a telescope too.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess people want to access your videos later. Some of them are on your YouTube channel or Vimeo. And tell me one last thing about your great collaborator and how you guys ended up blending so well.
Hazel and I have been colleagues for a long time, and we have coffee often. And then I knew she was working on a collaboration with a poet friend of hers in Britain. And I just asked her, and she really, I think Lady, my second book, really kind of connected with her. And I just asked if she'd be interested in creating poetry films for me with Lady, and everything she does, I love it. I just think this is perfect. And I don't know, it's just a wonderful collaboration. And the other really nice thing about this is, as a poet, often you work very much alone, right? So you're just always alone in your room, and then maybe you go and you do a reading, but it still feels like you're just this individual collaborator. And there's something awesome about collaborating with someone else, because then it's a really sort of back and forth. So Hazel will send me, and I don't know, maybe Hazel wants to say something about it, but she'll send me a first draft, and almost always I'll be pretty much, yeah, I like this. Like Elizia, I wasn't sure at first. That was the first one where I thought, oh, I don't know. But then it really, really grew on me as I listened to it. And made me think a little bit of, I don't know, some kind of 1970s documentary / maybe police thriller. I'm not sure, but I really started to like it. So it's a very, very fluid process, and it just works really well for, I hope, for both of us. I think we're both enjoying it a lot.